At the core of the Hamas narrative, there's a degradation of desire. That degradation of desire causes fundamental shame. Shame means the experience, not that I did something wrong, that I am wrong. And that experience that I am wrong is so fundamentally painful that we can't live with it, so we cover it up. We cover it up with pseudo-eros. I read it over this morning. Everyone should take a look at it. You can find it online. The Charter of Hamas, which is aligned with Iran. Iran that's been involved in the last year in the slaughter of its own women teenagers for daring to assert their autonomy as women, as human beings. Masha Amin, we've talked about what's happened in the last year in Iran. And so Iran, representing the most brutal repression of the feminine, of Eros, of goodness, truth, and beauty, is actually responsible for both the Hezbollah on the north border of Israel, for all of the terror cells on the west bank of Israel, for the terror cells in Lod and Ramla in central Israel, which is a tiny country, right, and for an extensive Hamas terror organization in Gaza, whose commitment is, and please just go online and read the charter of Hamas, the commitment is to have no negotiated settlement, no peace, no sharing of land, no shared story of value, no possibility of coexistence, right? The charter is clear that only the annihilation of Israel and only the restoration of the entire region as an Islamic state based on the most fundamentally human violating principles of the most repressive and ugly versions of medieval Islam, only their triumph will actually satisfy the prophet. And if you don't adhere to that, or if you assert, for example, the independent integrity and autonomy, right, of the feminine, independent of its service to the masculine, which is all, this is all in the charter, right, of Hamas. If you reject that, you're in violation of the law of the prophet. So, for example, honor killing, right, killing a woman, right, who is suspect of having, quote unquote, fooled around with someone, right, is completely legitimate, and no evidence need brought. It needs to be brought that the woman was actually in violation of this ostensible moral turpitude. One merely says one was engaged in honor killing. So I want you to get this. This is deep. So in the pseudo-erotic love story, where love is limited, to a very small group of people, so everyone outside of that group is not worthy of love, is not to be loved, is not to be honored, can be degraded and dehumanized, because actually everyone outside of that circle of love is actually considered to be not fully human, and therefore can be slaughtered at a nature party without regard, with intention. That's rooted in this fundamental shame. Now stay close, okay? Stay close. This is so deep and it's so tragic and it needs to be understood. That shame is rooted in a degradation of the experience of desire and love itself. That shame is rooted in a degradation of the experience of desire and love itself. So one, the degradation of love, right? When you tell a person, when you murder someone outside of this narrow circle, that's not murder. That's for the sake of the Lord, for the sake of Allah. That person's interior sense of the mystery, that person's interior sense of goodness, truth, and beauty, that person's interior sense of anthro-ontology, the ontology, the realness and goodness of cosmos that lives in me, is violated. Do you think you can paraglide from Gaza into Israel into a nature party and slaughter dozens of teenage women and actually not experience a profound revulsion and shame about who you are? Do you think you can participate, right, in that kind of slaughter, in that kind of destruction of love, or that kind of limitation of love? I love only this small group. No one else is worthy of love. Not only are they not worthy of love, but they're worthy of the worst degradation. Do you understand that the shame that causes? That's number one. It's the shame of your own interior degradation. That's one. But there's a deeper root shame, right? We're all on number three now. There's a deeper root shame. And the deeper root shame is that your very desire itself has been degraded. In other words, in Hamas's vision of reality, which was also that of the Catholic Church till very, very recently, but it reigns in Hamas today, and it reigns in Iran today. It's why Masha Amin and hundreds of Iranian women were tortured and killed in the last year, including high school girls. Because the story of desire they told is that desire itself is fundamentally degraded, and that sensual desire is fundamentally degraded, and that the sense of goodness and truth and beauty that lives in the body is fundamentally degraded. So when you degrade desire, and yet that desire continues to live and to rage, right, in the young men of Hamas and the young men of the Ayatollah Revolutionary Guard and the young men of the quote-unquote military wings of Hamas and of Hezbollah, that desire continues to rage. And so the self-experience of the young men is that we are degraded, that we are fundamentally impure, that we are fundamentally revolting to the divine, that we are somehow disgusting to the divine. And so there's this internal sense of shame, and there's this inability to trust the core experience of the body. When there's an inability to trust the core experience of the body, when there's a fundamental degradation of desire that lives in a human being, then the human being becomes alienated from their own capacity to trust themselves and to trust their moral sense, to use an outdated 18th century term, to trust their deepest participation in the field of Eros value. All of that gets alienated, gets truncated from a person's inner heart, and a person no longer has access to the whisperings of goodness, truth, and beauty that live within them. That's huge. So we have to get this, right? There's at the core of the Hamas narrative, there's a degradation of desire. That degradation of desire causes fundamental shame. Shame means the experience, not that I did something wrong, that I am wrong. And that experience that I am wrong is so fundamentally painful that we can't live with it, so we cover it up. We cover it up with pseudo-eros, which are fantasies in which love lives in this very narrow place between me and my very internal narrow set of people, and everyone else outside of their circle, of my circle, is an infidel to be butchered and killed for the sake of some illusory fantasy of purity. It's like, wow,